On this episode of China Uncensored, the One China policy. Welcome to China Uncensored. I'm your Prince of Paradox, Chris Chappell. There can be only one! China, that is. The problem is, two governments claim to be that one China. First, there's the Republic of China, aka Taiwan, and then there's the People's Republic of China, aka Mainland China. Sounds confusing? That's because it is, and it's caused a diplomatic headache for the world. So why are there two Chinas claiming to be the one China? Well, it started like this. First there was a Kuomintang, also spelled like this, led by Sun Yat-sen, and they officially established the Republic of China in 1911 and controlled mainland China after the fall of the Qing dynasty. Already confusing, isn't it? But then World War II happened and Japan invaded and the Kuomintang was at war. Once Japan was defeated, the Kuomintang-controlled Republic of China gained a seat as a permanent member of the UN Security Council. It also reclaimed Taiwan from 50 years of Japanese control. But soon Mao Zedong and his army of communist guerrillas figured it was a good idea to plunge the country back into war and resume their fight with the Kuomintang. They had tried to overthrow the Kuomintang for years, usually with disastrous results for the communists, but having just spent the past 8 years fighting the highly modernized and ferocious Japanese army, the Kuomintang was not in tip-top shape, and in 1949 the communists seized control of mainland China, forming the People's Republic of China. The Kuomintang retreated to Taiwan and moved the government of the Republic of China over there. So now we have two governments claiming to control the one China, so then the rest of the world was like, WTF, who's the legitimate government of China? Which was kind of a problem because China, whichever one was China, had a permanent seat on the UN Security Council. That wasn't too much of a problem for the 50s and 60s because the communists ruling mainland China were more interested in starving and murdering Chinese people, and it was the height of the Cold War, and since Russia was already on the Security Council, the US, France, and England much preferred to recognize Taiwan as China. But by the 70s, China, that is the People's Republic of China, and the Soviet Union had a falling out, and Nixon, seeing China as now a counterbalance to the USSR and even a means of ending the Vietnam War, began pushing for normalized relations with China, the People's Republic of China. Mao must have also realized the benefit of having a one-vote veto in the UN, and so since you could only recognize one China, it was decided that China was no longer China, but Taiwan, and China became recognized as China. And that's how one of the world's worst violators of human rights is responsible for how the UN handles violators of human rights. So then, where does that leave China-China relations today? Well, the Chinese regime, aka the People's Republic of China, that is ruled by the Chinese Communist Party, considers Taiwan a breakaway province and has vowed to retake it by force if necessary, to finally bring an end to their longtime foes, the Republic of China. And so there are a lot of missiles pointed at Taiwan on the mainland side of the Taiwan Strait. As of 2012, it was more than 1,600 missiles to be exact. So why didn't they ever invade? Well, that's because the US has been loading up Taiwan with military hardware, giving aid, and have even built radio towers with the purpose of spreading democracy in China. Mainland China, that is. Douglas MacArthur, once the US Supreme Commander of the Southwest Pacific area, referred to Taiwan as an unsinkable aircraft carrier. And so the US has made it pretty clear that if China has a problem with China, they also have a problem with the US. But that doesn't mean the US recognizes China as China. Certainly not. While most countries in the world have to state very clearly which China they recognize, and they almost always recognize the People's Republic as China, the US is, well, a superpower and does pretty much whatever it wants. So instead of saying either China is China or China is China, the official US position is that it acknowledges that both sides claim to be China, agrees Taiwan isn't its own sovereign nation, which would mean that it were an independent country that is not China, which it most definitely is not, but doesn't recognize the PRC's sovereignty over Taiwan either. But for basically all other countries, not clearly siding with the People's Republic can have pretty dire consequences. Since it is a permanent member of the UN Security Council, it can use its veto power to block or threaten to block UN peacekeeping operations, as it did in Haiti in '96, Guatemala in '97, and Macedonia in '99. Macedonia has since severed ties with Taiwan. On this episode of China Uncensored, two Chinas for the price of one, or one China for the price of two. I'm not really sure how this works. Hi, welcome back to China Uncensored. I'm your host, Chris Chappell. Remember how it felt during gym class when they were picking kids for the team and you were the one no one wanted? Obviously, I can't relate to that because I'm extremely athletic. But that's essentially what happened to Taiwan. When the world had to pick their favorite China, the Communist Party of China in the mainland or the Republic of China in Taiwan, the world chose the Communist Party to have diplomatic relations with, which is strange considering the shape the two leaders were in. But anyway, very few countries picked Taiwan to be on their diplomacy team. And now, even though for all intents and purposes Taiwan is a separate country, only a small handful of nations acknowledges it. And so, since the Communist Party of China was the cool kid that got picked, it's been bullying Taiwan by pointing missiles at it and threatening to invade. So I sat down with Ian Easton, a research fellow at Project 2049, to discuss the Communist Party's plans to invade Taiwan. Thank you for joining us today, Ian.
Chris, it's a pleasure to be here.
All right. So the Chinese Communist Party says Taiwan is a province of China. The Chinese Communist Party also says it plans to invade Taiwan by 2020. My question is, how can China invade itself?
That's a very good question. It's not at all clear that China is capable of invading itself, nor is it clear that Taiwan is actually part of the People's Republic of China.
How dare you?
It's sad but true that Xi Jinping and the Chinese Communist Party have this narrative as part of the CCP's creation myth, as you're well aware, that they control or ought to administer the Republic of China, Taiwan. But actually, since December 1949, Taiwan has been operating as a free and independent country.
So, not one China.
Well, they've both, for a long time, both the Republic of China government and the People's Republic of China government maintained that they were the legitimate government and that there was only one, that it was a zero-sum game. And of course,
the Highlander policy.
It's very much the Highlander policy, and unfortunately, the U.S. government played into that, and that was a choice that was made in the 1970s to continue
the whole
to play
UN
into it.
too.
Countries around the world until this day, mostly because they're afraid of thinking about any alternative solution, because of course alternatives do exist. Policy it's man-made and it's flexible, and we as a sovereign country can define what our policy is. And I'm not advocating for anything in particular, but one of the things that I've tried to do with my research, and that we here as an institute at the Project 2049 try to do, is just lay out the facts as best as we can. And one of the facts is, and this is a little controversial or a little uncomfortable for people in Beijing, is that the PRC has never for a single day actually ever controlled or administered Taiwan, and Taiwan continues to exist as a free and independent country. Now, it's not treated by the rest of the world that way, but that is the objective reality. And I know because I've lived in China, and I've lived in Taiwan, and I've lived in other countries like Japan, and you can tell it's real.
So do you think the Communist Party's threat of actually invading Taiwan is at all serious?
Well, as far as I'm aware, and of course my knowledge on this is limited, as far as I'm aware, they've not actually said they are going to invade Taiwan. What happened was about 9 years ago, the People's Liberation Army got the order from the top leadership in the Politburo to prepare to be ready to invade Taiwan, if so ordered by the year 2020. It's called the 2020 plan.
So that's a lot of steps. Be prepared to be ready to be ordered.
If we order you.
To attack.
Right. Okay. And so it's an aspiration. And this has happened before in the past, where the CCP civilian leadership has given the armed wing of the Chinese Communist Party, which is the PLA. I mean, they are PLA too, or they're CCP too. Every officer in the PLA is a member of the Chinese Communist Party. But it's given the armed wing this order that here's what you should aspire to, here's what you should get ready for. And it's, I don't want to alarm you or any of your viewers, but it's pretty incredible when you think about it that this has been the PLA's marching order since about 2008. And this is what drives them. So when you look at China's sweeping military reform and modernization program, when you look at this massive military buildup that is going on in China, this is the principal primary objective. They're preparing for World War III because ultimately that's what would happen.
Well, how would it cause World War III, an invasion of Taiwan?
Well, if the Chinese were to actually attempt a full-scale invasion and occupation of Taiwan, it's almost certain that the United States would come to Taiwan's defense. And of course, that could easily escalate to a very dangerous place.